The Momodora series has captivated indie Metroidvania and action fans through its fantasy narrative, charming characters, gorgeous environments, and challenging gameplay systems for over 10 years. Each entry builds upon the previous systems and, at times, even switches up the gameplay elements. Momodora Moonlit Farewell is meant to be the end of this story arc, and every milestone met while descending into the depths of a dungeon wraps up specific aspects of these characters' journeys that fans will immediately appreciate. Still, everything isn't as it seems, and a few key twists manage to make the game more than just a goodbye. Momodora Moonlit Farewell opens as Momo attempts to descend the depths of a demon-filled dungeon that resides underneath the village of Koho. Someone has summoned these beasts, and Momo is eager to figure out who this mysterious figure is. However, it becomes a bit more complicated after Momo meets a demon-like cat, but I'd hate to spoil the story. However, I will say that all of the stops have been pulled out for this adventure. If you were confused or left with questions after the previous titles, this one hands them to you on a silver platter after you put in some work. Momo is a very capable protagonist, but this time she is paired up with a new character named Cereza, who acts as a beacon of relaxation within the dungeon but isn't fully understood until later in the adventure. That said, returning characters make their way into the story and lead assistance when they can. You'll likely be wondering if you have to play the previous games before this entry. Well, while it's advised that you do, the developer does include some notes on the previous adventures that provide a rundown of the lore and some of Momo's outings. I will say that you should play the other games in the series. They each have a runtime of about 10 hours and make up some of my favorite gaming memories with an indie series. Momodora Moonlit Farewell follows the same trend, as it also can be completed in about 10 to 15 hours on a first playthrough if you're playing on normal difficulty. There's an easier mode that can be changed at 2 at any time, but that does make the adventure much faster. So, with the narrative providing one of the best wrap-up arcs that I've experienced to date, let's talk about the gameplay. Here, we see a return to the Metroidvania format as Momo moves through a maze-like dungeon made up of various sized rectangles. I found Momo's movement speed and overall physics to be kind of unique. She's a little slow in the base movement speed, and while running is obtained later on, it's tied to the stamina meter. Regardless, as I got acclimated with her jump animation, dodge roll, and base movement speed, I ended up really liking it. If I had to point to a game that it reminds me of, I'd say it's something like Mega Man. It all helps that Momo is made up of some of the cutest pixels, which makes spending time getting lost and navigating the dungeon a little more bearable. Exploration is never explicitly laid out for you. The direction you choose to travel will typically branch off and either lead to a new area or a section of the game that requires an ability to get through. This non-linear style allows players to avoid certain boss battles and instead find secrets that lead to berries, which offer increased stats for HP, attack, and magic. Reaching a dead end is often an indicator that there's a secret somewhere, but the developer was also nice enough to include a question mark on areas that contain items. That said, there are moments where I felt a little lost and would have preferred a bit more direction if only to progress the narrative faster. Playing on normal difficulty comes with a decent degree of challenge. Momo doesn't have the highest defense stats, so expect to die at least a few times. However, you'll quickly learn that there aren't many checkpoints, and moving quickly around the dungeon isn't introduced until a few hours in. While playing, this felt like needless padding on the game's runtime, as your first encounter with the boss battle will likely end quickly. But to try again, you'll have to make your way all the way back to the fight, which isn't always that easy. Regardless, you do hold on to your moon crystals and have the option to interact with the bells scattered around the dungeon to slowly regain health and MP over time. Early in the game, MP will likely be only consumed by healing yourself. However, as you collect new sigils and improve your abilities, you slowly have to learn how to manage your healing and ability usage. I found this to be a great system as it eases players into the challenge to get good over time before pushing their skills with the introduction of tougher enemies. Sigils are cards found throughout the dungeon that offer improved base stats and new combat skills. Over time, you are able to equip more sigils and customize your preferred loadout. I appreciated this added layer of customization as it allows players to define their approach to combat to fit their playstyle. For attacks, Momo has access to a sword and bow. The base combo can be extended in some ways, and you can add elemental properties to the arrows, but surviving encounters mainly comes down to player skill. For instance, the dodge roll doesn't seem to be able to interrupt attack animations, but the timing and responsiveness made it a necessary tool in every fight. Further, if you dodge at a time right before a hit, you can enter an invulnerability state to land some extra hits. Typical enemies won't stand in your way too much, but there are arena-like areas where you have to face off against a series of enemy waves, which was a challenge that I really enjoyed. However, it is the boss encounters that will likely be the lasting factor of this adventure. Each boss seems to be a culmination of the game that came before. Their unique attack patterns and phases were incredibly fun to navigate, as my understanding of Momo's moveset was really put to the test. I'll be honest and say that I died a lot, probably more than I'd like to admit, but if this was to truly be a final game in this series, I'd say the developer Bombservice left us on a high note. It'd also be a shame not to mention the game's brilliant soundtrack, which managed to add tension to each encounter. Momodora Moonlit Farewell wraps up all the loose ends of this series and ties them up with a white bow. The exploration and combat systems showcase the best this series has to offer with an added layer of customization for good measure. There are some stumbles within navigation and gameplay systems, but nothing holds back the intensity that this adventure has to offer. Here's to hoping that this isn't the last game we see from Bombservice, because, based on this release, they're just getting started. Noisy Pixel is giving Momodora Moonlit Farewell an 8.5 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. Noisy Pixel is run by a group of gamers providing independent gaming coverage through news, reviews, previews, and more. Check out our Patreon to help support our continued growth, and subscribe to keep up with all our future content.
Noisy Pixel.